Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today for what is the very first episode of Rusty Talks Politics. I am absolutely thrilled and honored that you decided to join me today for this episode, and hopefully for future episodes as we try to navigate the next 3.5 months and determine whether the Democrats are going to pick up the House or the Senate, who's going to control the most governorships, which candidates are going to win individual races, will Trump's unpopularity drag other Republican candidates down. So a little bit about myself. My name is Rusty, and I have a history of working in Democratic politics on senior staff on campaigns. So I've done things like messaging, I've worked on polling, I've worked on things like volunteer recruitment, I've looked at like demographics and mailers, all those little things that factor into a race I've worked on. So I hope to use that experience to try to help you answer some questions. And if you have any experience with politics, or perhaps you are a layman or a laywoman when it comes to politics and you've built up a lot of knowledge over the years, I want to hear your feedback. Please leave comments in the section below. I want to hear what your thoughts are as we get closer and closer to the 2018 midterms. So with what we're going to do over the next 3.5 months, I just want to give you a brief overview. We're going to look at the big picture, and that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to look at control for the Senate, but we're also going to look at things from a granular level. We're also going to dive down, and we're going to look at those individual factors like fundraising. We're going to look at messaging. We're going to look at polling. We're going to look at volunteer recruitment and energy. We're going to look at all those factors that determine whether a candidate can prevail. So without further ado, let's get right to it. And the first question you might ask me is, well, Rusty, if Trump won Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania, why do you have the Democrats in those states as being so safe? Well, the answer lies in the fact that some of those senators in the industrial Midwest are not like your typical Democrats across the rest of the country. They don't always vote with the Democrats 100% of the time, and they may identify with Trump on occasion. And a couple of examples of that, so you got Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. He's pro-life. Sherrod Brown in Ohio, who's pro-tariff. And we know that Trump has been on a big tariff kick lately, and that's winning some credibility with some of those Obama to Trump voters that switched from the Democrats to the Republicans in 2016. And so some of them, not all of them, but some of them are identifying with those candidates, and that's pushing them up well above the 50% mark, as we can see in polling. We've got Tammy Baldwin up 15 to 17 points, Debbie Stabenow up anywhere from 18 to 15 points, and we've got just the Democrats in general, and governorships as well, really outperforming the other races and throughout the rest of the country. So that's why I've got the upper Midwest, or the Rust Belt, so to speak, identifying with the Democrats right now, and that's where you get to the 45 to 47. There are 8 states that I think could go either way in November. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that they're all toss-ups as of now, and we'll get through that as we get through the video, but I do think that North Dakota, Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Missouri, Indiana, Tennessee, and Florida could go to either the Republican or the Democrat. Now, let's start with Texas. Texas is an interesting case because it's changing demographically so fast. There are so many immigrants and so many transplants from other parts of the country moving into Texas, a lot of college-educated voters. The economy is doing extremely well, and that's bringing more socially moderate voters into Texas, which we know has historically voted extremely conservative and extremely Republican, both socially and economically. And Ted Cruz is very unpopular, not just nationally, but within his own party and within the state of Texas. And you've got his opponent, Beto O'Rourke, who's a congressman in Texas 16 down by El Paso. He hasn't quite generated all the name recognition he needs to yet, but it's still early, and he's made a commitment to go to every single county in the state of Texas and talk to every single voter, regardless of party line, and that has really made him a very popular candidate with voters that do know who his name is. Now, that doesn't mean that I think Texas is going to go blue. I think that with polling right now, you've got about 8 to 9 points. I think it's still underestimating the Democratic surge that's going to happen, that I do believe is going to happen in November, but I do think he's more around the 3 to 5 point mark. And Texas could go blue if everything breaks right for the Democrats, but for now we're going to go ahead and color that Republican for Ted Cruz, but I do think Beto's got probably about a 20 to 30% chance of winning, which is not zero. And let's go to a sort of similar state demographically, a lot of Latinx voters there. And we've got the incumbent Bill Nelson, who is running against the challenger Rick Scott, the governor. And typically your challenger has to build name recognition, and that works against them because they have to spend a lot of time and money doing that. But in Florida, Rick Scott doesn't have that problem because he's already built up name recognition. He's already won a statewide race, so Florida voters already know who he is, and he's very popular. Whereas the incumbent Bill Nelson has not been that popular in Florida, so Rick Scott definitely has those things in his favor. If you look at polling, the polling for this race has been all over the map. It's been anywhere from 4 points Republican to 4 points Democrat. I think like every other poll has the Democrat winning, and then every other poll has a Republican winning. So in terms of polling, it's basically even Steven as of late July, early August 2018. Now, I do again think that in those states where there is a lot of demographic change happening, where there are a lot of college educated, socially moderate voters that are not happy with Trump, I do think that those polling, uh, those polls are not fully capturing the Democratic wave that's going to happen in 2018. I think that turnout, they're using turnout modeling that's sort of based on 2010 or 2014, and I think that turnout in 2018 is going to just absolutely blow away turnout from previous midterm elections. So I do think Bill Nelson, because of the demographics of the state and because of Trump's unpopularity nationally, I do think that Bill Nelson will probably prevail, but I would give him about a 60% chance right now. Rick Scott definitely has a shot. We're going to stay in the Sun Belt, but we're going to move to the American Southwest in Nevada and Arizona. Dean Heller is the incumbent in Nevada, and he's one of the most unpopular senators in all of the country, mainly because he voted to take away the Affordable Care Act. Now, we're not going to get into the merits or, you know, bad parts of the Affordable Care Act right now, but voters liked at least the ability to sign up for insurance without having to worry about being denied for a pre-existing condition. And that's important to working class voters, of which there are a lot in Nevada. And so if you have 2 or 3 jobs and you don't have insurance through your employer, whatever the cost is, you at least appreciated being able to sign up without having to worry about being denied for a previous health condition. So when Dean Heller voted to strip the Affordable Care Act away from Americans, that really hurt his standing in a state that's already trending heavily Democratic. It's gone Democratic in the past 3 election cycles. Again, we've got a lot of demographic change happening there. So I think Nevada is going to go blue, and we are going to give that as the first Democratic pickup in the 2018 race for Senate. Let's move over to Arizona, where we've got Kyrsten Sinema, who's going to be the Democratic nominee against a yet-to-be-determined Republican challenger. It's either going to be Martha McSally, Kelly Ward, or Joe Arpaio, all 3 of whom have identified sort of with Trumpian-style politics, whereas Kyrsten Sinema has branded herself as a moderate. She's branded herself as someone who's able to listen to folks from both sides of the aisle, but is disgusted with sort of the tone and tenor that Trumpian-style politics has taken. And that's playing extremely well in Arizona, where you have a lot of college-educated voters, huge population center in Phoenix with a lot of suburban voters, where they may be Bush-style Republicans, but also just sort of fed up with the way that Trump carries himself. And that shows up in polling. So Kyrsten Sinema is polling extremely well. She's been up in almost every single poll against every single opponent, either over 50% or close to it. And so for that reason, I'm going to give Arizona a blue pickup. And that's important because that's going to get Democrats to 48 seats, to Republicans 48 seats. And that's going to give us our tie. All right. Now we're going to move over to Tennessee. Another interesting case because it's a traditionally Republican state. In presidential elections, it's always going to go Republican. But you've got Phil Bredesen, who's the former Tennessee governor, and he's sort of a socially conservative Democrat. He is extremely popular in Tennessee. When he left office, he was in the 60s and 70% range polling wise, whereas Marsha Blackburn is not popular in the state of Tennessee. And the polling backs that up. So most of the polling that's been out there, the Democrat Phil Bredesen has been up, and I do think that the Democratic wave combined with Bredeson's popularity is going to cause the Democrats to get over to that 49th seat. We're going to move up to North Dakota now, and I think this is the one state where Democrats are going to run into a bit of trouble. We've got Heidi Heitkamp, the incumbent, running into the challenger, Kevin Cramer, who's very well funded. He's a very formidable candidate, and I do think that this is going to be a Republican pickup, and I'll explain to you why. Let's look at the United States demographics in 2017. So this is as of July 1st of last year. You've got about 61% of Americans being white, and you've got about 30% of Americans having a college degree or more as of July 2017. Additionally, about 51% of Americans are female, so 50.8%. Now, let's keep that in mind as we look at North Dakota. North Dakota is 85% white. North Dakota only has about 28% of its residents with a college degree or more. And then additionally, when it comes to the makeup of male-female population, women only make up 48 to 49% of the population in North Dakota. If you look at who Trump's base is, non-college educated white voters are what's driving him and keeping him in the low 40s popularity range. He's polling about 65 to 70% among non-college educated white voters. That's the only reason that he's able to stay in that low 40s range. And North Dakota is a perfect state for that. His approval rating in North Dakota is well above 50%. And because there are so many non-college educated, especially white men, that's exactly the Republican brand, the Trumpian brand right now. And that's why I think that Kevin Cramer is going to do well enough to outperform Heidi Heitkamp on November 6th. Now, you'd think because Missouri and Indiana have a lot of similar demographic characteristics to North Dakota that I would also classify Claire McCaskill, the Democratic incumbent, and Joe Donnelly, the Democratic incumbent in those two states, as being in just as much trouble as Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. But I'm not ready to put a lean Republican or Democrat on those states just yet, and I'll tell you why. Missouri and Indiana, while they do have a lot of non-college educated white voters, they also have some populated college educated centers like Kansas City, St. Louis, and Missouri. And then in Indiana, you've got Indianapolis. They've also got a heavy minority presence in terms of the Chicago suburbs in Indiana and Kansas City and St. Louis in Missouri. So because there are some heavily Republican characteristics in both of those states, but also some Democratic characteristics, plus the Democratic wave, I would classify both Missouri with Joe Donnelly and Claire McCaskill incumbents as pure toss-ups with their challengers Mike Braun and Josh Hawley, the Missouri Attorney General, as we go into early August of 2018. Now, things are subject to change. As the race updates, we may be able to push the category of one of these states into one party or the other, but we will wait and see what happens as we get closer to November. That's where I think things stand. 49 Democrats, 49 Republicans, too close to call for Senate control. That's going to do it for this video. Really appreciate you tuning in. But what I want you to do is leave a comment below. I'm going to do a state for the next video. I'm going to profile one Senate race in a given state, and I haven't decided which yet. So leave a comment. Let me know which state you think I should take a deep dive into, and we will see you for the next video. Thanks so much, everybody.